Have you ever watched a movie that just utterly pissed you the fuck off and you feel like you just wasted an hour and 30 minutes or whatever? Well, I feel this way about this film called The Haunting with actually pretty good actors Liam Neeson, Catherine Zeta Jones, and some other woman, which she was fucking annoying in this film that I watched last night. Let me tell you a backstory. We were playing this movie night with a couple of girlfriends, and a couple of guy friends were over, but they left because it was supposed to be a girl night. And we were making cookies, and we had like some wings from Pizza Hut and lasagna, which I did not eat. I did not eat the lasagna, but we were picking out a movie. I suggested a horror movie because I love horror films, especially older films, B-rated horror in particular, because I feel like those type of films are the best because they don't even try to have these special effects or CGI. They just rely on the visuals. They rely on the blood. They rely on the deaths, and they rely on the scare tactics. And I really appreciate that about those films. But we were looking on Netflix because one of my friends was like, I don't really like horror movies, which I fucking hate when people say that. Because first of all, some of these girls be assholes. Like, they act so badass. They act, just the type of person who thinks they're so cool because they do this and that. And they try to, like, call you immature and use sort of ableist rhetorics like, you don't act your age and that type of stuff. But when I suggest a good horror film, they want to act like, excuse my French, pussies. They really do. They want to act like punks and say that, they have nightmares. But you do all this stuff. You want to act hardcore. You want to act all of this, but you can't even sit there and watch a fake ass movie, with blood, guts, gore, and deaths, and demons, and zombies, and witches, and slasher killers. And it pisses me off because these are people that are like, dude, you talk all this jazz, you talk all this big shit about how you are hard and that you're from the streets. You don't want to watch a good horror film. Maybe, I don't know, like maybe some just don't like it, and I understand that. But then when they finally agreed to watch a horror film with me, they pick out the shittiest films, and you can tell those are the types who hate horror films, because a good horror movie watcher would try to pick a movie that sounds good and not just a random flick that sounds very cheesy, because a horror nerd or a horror fanatic would at least pick a movie that sounds halfway decent. Not something like The Haunting, which, it actually did sound like a good movie, but it was cheesy. It wasn't scary. It was like watching a Disney horror film. It was so bad. Like I kept saying, this is shitty, this is shitty, this is a shit movie. The acting is shit. And they were like, I'm going to kick you out, Care, if you keep complaining. But I'm like, you picked this shitty ass film. And then eventually they were like, yeah, you're right. It is a shitty film. And I was pretty drunk too. I was like, I had like hard lemonade. I wasn't really drunk, but like I'm someone that's like a little lightweight. So I get drunk pretty easily, or at least tipsy. I'm sorry, that was gross. But it was just, like people talk about how the effects were good and the visuals, but what's the point if you're like having shitty acting and shitty scares? I'm not sure if it were a PG-13 horror film or if it were like an R-rated horror film that was just really poorly done. I like how you gonna get Liam Neeson and Catherine Zeta-Jones, who is very pretty, by the way. I haven't really seen a movie with Catherine Zeta-Jones. I didn't really know exactly what she looked like until I saw that movie last night. But she's very pretty. Anyway, random thought aside. How you gonna get like two like well-known actors who are pretty decent, especially Liam Neeson, and then just, I don't know, like create this travesty and pass it off as a horror film? On IMDb, it has a like 4.7 rating. I almost watched Shrooms because I thought, hey, this seems like a pretty good movie to watch, because first of all, I'm again tipsy. I'm drinking, and I wanted to, basically watch a horror film where I can trip the fuck out and like, whoa, and I wanted to have that experience. But then when I finally say, you know what, this seems like a good movie, then they're like, let's watch The Haunting. And I feel like, they pick movies that they know I'm not gonna like, because they know that if I like a horror film, they know it must be pretty scary, because I like pretty scary movies. It doesn't even have to have blood, guts, or gore. All you need is good scare tactics, like The Omen. I don't really care for The Exorcist because I don't really find that scary, but it's still a decent horror movie. And I don't want to watch Halloween all of the time. I watch Halloween like so many times, and I can just remember every scene verbatim. I like Friday the 13th series. I like the series. Well, at least up until like maybe the fourth film, and then like skip to the sixth, because like the fifth film was decent, but there was a lot of complaints, and I can see why. But I feel like had it been, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, had there been, Jason in that film, it would have been better. And Jason was not in the first movie, but you know we didn't know that Jason, was going to be in the movie. People forget, like, Friday the 13th came out in 1980 when people did not know who the killer was. We did not know that there was, a Jason Voorhees in a hockey mask going out to kill people. We did not know who Pamela Voorhees was. Now, to people who weren't born in that era, yeah, you're thinking that it's Jason, but you weren't supposed to realize that it was not Jason, because the movie was made before we even understood the concept of Jason and Mrs. Voorhees. So you can't compare Halloween 5, Friday the 13th 5 to the first Friday the 13th movie. And then people bring up Halloween 3, which I did not really like. And I think I was kind of narrow-minded too. And the Cinema Snob made a point that John Carpenter was not intending to make another Michael Myers movie. He was trying to like make a series. But since everyone bitched about how horrible the movies were, the movie was, then like he kind of stopped. And that actually was a pretty good film, now that I wasn't so like, oh, Michael Myers isn't in the film. I kind of feel guilty about that. I was kind of being narrow-minded, because people were just complaining because Michael Myers wasn't in the film. People weren't really watching Halloween 3. They were just expecting Michael. That's why they said it was so bad, because of Michael. But there were some pretty good deaths too, and I didn't really notice how awesome the deaths were until the Cinema Snob, you know, showed me the light. But back to The Haunting, I didn't even really finish the film because we ended up leaving, and I had to walk back to my dorm because I'm like the annoying one out of the group, the annoying drunk, I guess. But whatever, like, they called me and make sure that I got back home safe, because I was about to pitch a fit by saying, if I expect you to walk me back to my dorm, I kind of want to, because it doesn't take that much effort to like walk me, a few yards to my dorm and then walk back to whatever you're going to do. I kind of expect people to be more decent than that, because I would probably, walk them back to their dorm, because I don't mind doing that. I like being around people. But like, tell me, like, what is your favorite horror movie? Because I don't really care for the modern movies unless they're really good. I liked High Tension. That was a pretty good film. I like Saw, and I'm pretty sure the first couple of Saw movies are pretty good. But I don't really like those cheap horror movies where you just like churned out to make a buck, and I can tell. And I know The Haunting was probably like a big budgeted film, but it was still shit. It sucked. What else? I'm trying to think of what else to say. Yeah, I like. I really like the 80s horror films. Just, it's not really horror. It's like splatter films. I enjoyed Basket Case. Basket Case to me was a pretty good, gore flick for what it was. Even though the acting was pretty, wonky. It was pretty bad, but if you wanted to go in to watch a good splatter film, you are satisfied. That is a satisfying horror movie. And it's pretty tragic too at the end, aside from the fact that there were 2 more sequels, like maybe 8 years later, but whatever. And then I also like movies from the 70s because they have this horror mystery feel to it, like The Shining, The Omen, The Exorcist, When a Stranger Calls, The Last House on the Left, Black Friday. I didn't really care as much for what's that film, Sorority Road, like the original. I feel like the only good death was like the head in the toilet, which I did not see because that would have creeped me the fuck out. I am so scared of severed heads. Like ever since I saw Friday the 13th Part 6, when that black girl Sissy got her head like ripped off by Jason, and Megan goes to the car, running from Jason, and she opens up the car door. It was a red car. Red car. You get my reference, Good point. Okay, that was kind of cheesy, but she opens the door and like the head falls out and the eyes are all white because her eyes are rolled in the back of her head. And ever since then, I was scared of severed heads. Mrs. Voorhees' severed head, in part 2, creepy as fuck. And actually, an original ending of Friday the 13th Part 2, or how people described it, the head was going to open up its eyes, but they deemed it too stupid. I probably would have deemed it too scary because that would have really scared me. I remember when I watched Suspiria, when the girl's dead body is like lying there in the barbed wires, like the coils or whatever they were, and I'm like, okay, that's very creepy. It was actually pretty creepy, and I thought, she's dead. And like, what harm can she fucking do? Well, spoiler alert, in the end, where the girl is like trying to kill off the witch, she summons the corpse of her roommate to kill her. It was a reanimated corpse, and that really like tripped me out. That scared me. It really did. And I didn't really think Suspiria was, the best horror movie I saw, because I got so many people telling me, oh, it's a good movie. It was recommended to me on IMDb, and I think it was a decent horror film. Maybe I have to watch it again, but I feel like I'm a little bit picky when it comes to that. I'm like a horror movie snob, and it's funny because I'm not that snobbish, because you just give me like a good old cheesy horror flick from the 80s that probably would have deemed sucky. I would enjoy it because I really like those B-rated horror films. Even movies like, and I'm like, excuse me, because, this is going to be ableist because that's the title, but I believe, is it, I don't know, I think it's the movie like Mentally Insane or something, where this obese woman eats a lot of like food, and it's like very ableist and like fat shamey for the time period it is today. And I thought, like, aside from that and like the like racist remarks and anti-Semitism, because it's a pretty offensive horror film, so I probably would not recommend it. But I feel like even though it was low budget, it was pretty entertaining with the whole like it didn't really take itself seriously with like the horror and like the deaths. But I don't really mind that the older films are pretty shitty, because it's like you can tell that they tried to make it scary, and when they like try and they do their best, it comes out better than just not trying at all or trying too hard. And I got so mad when my friends were telling me, oh, that's old, that's an old horror film. I don't care. And it wasn't that old. It was from 1999. And I was like, your mom is old. Like, you still love her. You still like tolerate her, right? I guess you love her. And like, I'm like, no, because I'm sick of people saying like, oh, new is better. No, I firmly believe that old is usually better, because you can't beat the classics. And I want to watch a good old horror film. They want to watch some horror film like The Purge, or a movie that's not that scary like Paranormal Activity, which is a shitty horror movie best. And these are usually people who are casual horror watchers. I don't watch that many horror people would think, but I can at least, spot a good horror film. And if it's shitty, it's shitty. I'll let you know that it's shitty. I don't really ever. And that's why I'm so pissed off that I spent just what good movie, not wreck a horror fan. And that's the ideal. And I'm trying to think what to do for Labor Day weekend, because apparently someone's cooking dinner. And I hope there's fried chicken and mashed potatoes, because my mom would not let me come home even though there was a family reunion and they had fried chicken and they had mashed potatoes and they had baked chicken, which I don't really care for, and they had mac and cheese and baked beans. And I want all of that, for my Labor Day dinner with my brothers and sisters. So have a nice day. Good Sunday.